Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So welcome back to the show, Dr. Yogendra. There it is. I said it. I got it. He is a board-certified anesthesiologist with a diverse background in medicine and public health. He has experience in infection control and surveillance from prior public health roles before shifting to clinical practice. He now contributes to research on long COVID and post-COVID vaccine syndrome, co-authoring several studies on immune responses and treatments. He is the doctor who treated me originally for my vaccine injury and diagnosed me correctly and prescribed lots of treatments that helped me. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Yo. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy. Doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
It's great to see you. Now, everybody's making a big deal out of this new study. I don't know if you're aware of it at home, but Yale released a paper, and they found that the vaccine causes lots of the same symptoms long COVID does. And Yale scientists who risk careers to publish bombshell COVID vaccine study issue message to shots victims. Let me just go through this real quickly. On Wednesday, a team from Yale University, known for their rigorous work, revealed that the mRNA shots can cause a previously unknown condition known as post-vaccination syndrome. Wasn't unknown to me, and it wasn't unknown to Dr. Yo. We knew it 3 years ago at least, probably 4. The syndrome appears to cause brain fog, dizziness, tinnitus, extreme fatigue, and biological changes to patients' immune systems. I guess I had all of those. Plus more. I had nerve damage in my neck. Dr. Akiko Iwasaki, the lead researcher behind the paper, told DailyMail.com she understands her findings could be seen as controversial. Yeah, controversial to the big money interests. But she wants patients to know her team will keep studying and bring them better transparency and safer vaccines. Yeah, I don't know about that. Dr. Iwasaki told this website, for patients who are suffering from post-vaccination syndrome, we want them to know that we see you, we listen, and we will keep on doing more research in this area so that this condition can be recognized and better medical care can be provided. She believes her work will absolutely be a paradigm-shifting moment. Yeah, because it's coming from Yale. In a Yale study, participants with PVS, that's post-vaccination syndrome, had reactivated Epstein-Barr, a contagious virus that can cause flu-like symptoms, swollen lymph nodes, and nerve issues. So if you get the vaccine, it reignites all these latent things that were wrong with you and reactivates these viruses. Isn't this amazing? Because I had the exact thing happen to me. It also has been shown to attack the blood and marrow, which may have explained Mrs. Ponce de Leon's sudden blood disorders. Dr. Iwasaki's research is part of Yale's LISTEN study, an ongoing trial on post-vaccine injuries and long COVID, a mysterious condition blighting an estimated 17 million Americans. 17 million Americans. So you know that number's higher. The condition manifests differently in each person, but it includes an array of symptoms from fatigue to brain fog to shortness of breath. Had all those. The cause of long COVID is poorly understood, but one of the team's theories is that the COVID virus could be hiding in internal organs like the gut. This would make the virus undetectable in standard nasal swabs. Well, let me bring in Dr. Yo. You did a paper. I was part of a study that you came to these conclusions somewhere around 2021 or 2022. Am I correct?
2021. It's when November of 2021 is when we finalized all of these findings. It was about the summer of 2022. We actually put a preprint out on the server so the whole world could see. But between November of 2021 to June of 2022, we actually sent all this information to the FDA, the NIH, and the CDC, because our plan was, look, these are important findings. At the time, we really didn't know prevalence. We didn't know how many people, but we wanted to bring to the attention of the government agencies, hey, look, we got issues here. And we actually have some evidence and some data that we'd like to share with you. But we never heard from them. No one put my email, put my cell phone, my partner, Dr. Patterson's contact, and we didn't have anyone reach out to us. We also had many patient advocacy groups who personally took our research to many of the meetings with the FDA and the NIH, and unfortunately, we never heard from them.
So you were first on this. I'll just can you explain a little bit? I'm going to show in a second your journey on trying to get this published. The fact that you knew this stuff back in 2021 could have saved a lot of people a lot of physical ailments, but you couldn't get it published, which I will show that in a second. But what did you exactly find? Did you find that the spike protein is still being made inside people's bodies long after they have gotten the vaccine? Just tell me, can you tell a little bit about what you found?
Yeah, so I'll just take one step before that, Jimmy. What we found in 2020, before the vaccines were rolled out, is that there were a group of people after COVID infection, they have symptoms, which we now call long COVID or post-COVID. And when we looked at an unvaccinated long COVID or a post-COVID group of patients, what we ended up finding was they had spike proteins in a type of immune cell called a monocyte. Just imagine it's like the garbage truck of the body. And we found that months after COVID infection. And we also found these interesting immune signatures with a lot of statistical significance using artificial intelligence and machine learning. As we are treating these long COVID patients, we opened up our clinic in April of 2021. We actually started to get many long COVID patients coming in saying, all my symptoms got worse after the vaccine. And then we started seeing the vaccine injured patients. So then what we did was we took the vaccine injured patients and we did very rigorous screening to make sure, just like yourself, Jimmy, that they did not have a previous COVID infection. And when we looked into their blood, what we were shocked to find was there was spike proteins in there, in those monocytes. In our paper, we found 245 days after the last vaccination. We also found a very interesting immune signature that was slightly different than long COVID. It's got a very different immune signature. But the interesting thing is both groups of patients, we find a spike protein. Both groups of patients have vascular inflammation that is driving this entire pathology. So we're looking at massive vasculopathies and vascular inflammation in both conditions. Now, we took it one step further. We wanted to compare the spike protein from the virus that we were finding in patients, in the long COVID patients, and the spike proteins that we were finding in the vaccine group. And interestingly, we found some differences. In the vaccinated group that having complications, we actually found mutant S1, mutant spikes. So there are spike proteins that are not supposed to be there. And quite frankly, Jimmy, to this day, we have no idea if that is what's driving the pathology or not. And that's what I wanted the federal agencies in 2021 and 2022 to sort of help us investigate. And could that be what's driving maybe a couple of bad batches that these patients got? I mean, there's a lot of hypotheses there, but that was our initial finding. So a lot of what the Yale study, and I want to give credit to this team. They're just incredible bravery to look into this. As many of you know, I got a lot of death threats. Bruce and I, we had to change my email, had to leave social media. This is not an easy subject to discover, to look into, but I got to give the Yale guys a lot of credit. And in science, when you see another lab and another team that corroborates what you're finding, that adds a lot of hey, listen, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of science here. So unfortunately, we're talking about this in 2025, Jimmy. We should have been talking about this more in 2021, but we were censored. We were kicked off social media. You were being abused as an anti-vaxxer, even though you got the vaccine. Go figure. I was being called all sorts of names and anti-vax and grifter and charlatans and I mean, God knows what else, and trying to get ostracized I think there was an attempt to discredit anything that was being said.
Of course. Yeah, that's the name of the game. That's exactly what happened. And you have people like Peter Hotez and Dr. Fauci and Collins, and they, are the ones who were ubiquitous in the media, and they were out there saying anybody who questioned what they said was anti-science and anti-vax. And now we know that almost nothing they were saying was based in actual science, and it was just made up.
I want to say this, on April 29, 2021, and this is in public record, Representative Mike Doyle from Pittsburgh came across our research. And, I'm happy to share this congressional hearing that they had, where he actually brought up our research on long COVID, and we also sent some of the stuff on the vaccine. He made an introduction to Dr. Collins, and my partner, Dr. Patterson, actually had a couple of conversations with him. And they never talked to us after that. We had one phone conversation, 2 email conversations, and that was it. So they were fully aware of the work that we were doing. Here we are on top of a mountain screaming, "Hey, we have an issue here." Part of the scientific process is they collect the data, publish it, get it peer reviewed. That's kind of the name of the game, and that's what we were trying to do. We were not, running our mouths on social media and just saying all these things or going on podcasts without really any evidence. We had very strong evidence that there are some issues going on, but unfortunately we were ignored.
And so when you say a mutant spike protein, and it shouldn't be there, you mean it was a spike protein that didn't occur? Like what do you mean by that? What do you mean mutant?
So what they did was when they made the vaccines, the spike proteins, there are 2 subunits. There's an S1 and an S2. So you call it the S protein or an S subunit. And when they made the vaccines, they took the viral spike protein and they make the code for it, the protein code. And that's what's in the mRNA. So when you get injected with the mRNA, it's coding. Basically, it's going to read the code for the S1. And also the code for the S2, because they're putting the S code. What we found in all 4 vaccines with Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca, all 4 vaccine groups, we found there was a coding. We call it a mutant S1 because it's a code that we did not expect to find. It's not the S1 code. It's a different code.
So you're saying there might have the theory is that there might have been a mistake in the lab when they made the vaccine in the coding, and they invented a different type of spike protein, and then the one that was in the COVID virus. And so, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a hypothesis. Like I said, Jimmy, we don't know to this day. Is it just a benign finding, or is that what's driving the pathology? Just we don't have an idea. But we did find it in all 4 vaccine companies and in the vaccine injured patients when we looked at the spike.
So this Yale study, so you couldn't get published, but the Yale can because they're from Yale, and so it's making a big splash. So I don't know if I'm sure people have heard about it who watch this show. I haven't covered it yet because I was waiting to bring you on to cover it. And what is the next logical step with this kind of knowledge? Shouldn't the COVID-19 vaccine be pulled now? What do you say?
Here's the issue we have right now in studying the vaccine. You're going to have obviously a majority of the medical and scientific community that is either going to ignore these findings, or they're going to say it is an extremely small group of people, right? And completely disregard this. That's coming. And there are flaws in they can poke holes in this Yale study. Now I'll tell you some of the weaknesses in there, because in their study, some of the weaknesses are some of the things that, the study we did, they're going to find holes in it to try to discredit it and bury this whole vaccine issue here. So I think it's going to be very difficult to actually study mechanisms, to study prevalence, because the thing that's complicated the issue now is that not only is the vaccines, but now you got people on top of that getting COVID. They're getting COVID infections, right? Most of us have had 3, 4, or 5 different COVID infections now. So how do you get a pure patient population that is vaccinated but has never had COVID.
Right.
Our window to study this was in 2021 when we were doing this study, because there was obviously clearly a lot of people that didn't have COVID, have any documented history of COVID, just like yourself, Jimmy. We did multiple screening tests, so we could be very confident they didn't have COVID before. So I think that's where the problem is. It's like any sort of doing some studies into this, it's going to be difficult. But I will say this: there are, in our little tiny practice with 3 doctors, we've seen over 1,000 vaccine injured patients, just never had COVID, vaccine injured patients. On top of that, we've probably seen thousands more of long COVID patients who got significantly damaged, or significantly the symptoms got worse after the COVID infection. So if you want to maybe put that group together as a sort of a vax injured group, just from 3 doctors, we've probably seen about 3,000 to 4,000 vax injured patients. So I can't make any prevalence studies based on that, Jimmy. But if a small group like ours is seeing that, then you can only imagine what the actual numbers are. Plus, there's also a lot of people that don't want to talk about it. In this space where they're in chronic illnesses, no one wants to. Patients don't want to talk about it. They're afraid of being gaslit. Doctors, many long COVID clinics in the country, big clinics, they will all tell you privately they're seeing vax injured, but they will not tell you, in public. They're not going to say anything because they're terrified of losing funding. They're terrified of being anti-vax or being kicked out of the hospital. But I think the discussion needs to be had is, how do we get these people better? How do we run clinical trials with the government agencies so we get approved treatments for these patients? So they're not, I talk to these vaccine injured patients all the time, and they're going, well, my doctor won't prescribe this. My doctor won't do this. I don't know what to do. Not only in the United States. I mean, we got patients in Canada, in Australia, in Europe. So what do? We got to figure out, these battles are being had about prevalence and arguing about, hey, X number of people have it. We got to pull these vaccines off. And I'm trying to make the argument, there are people already injured from these vaccines. We got to get them better, Jimmy. We got to get them better today. I mean, whatever therapeutic doctors are talking about, or something that works for them, I'm happy to help them. We're working on an FDA phase 3, FDA approved phase 3 clinical trial on long COVID at the University of Arizona. And we can apply that same trial to the vaccine injured. Now, I'll tell you something very interesting. About 3 months ago, the PI from our study at Arizona officially submitted our study to the NIH Recover program, which is a program of $1.6 billion given by Congress of U.S. taxpayer money for long COVID research. It's February 28th today, Jimmy, and it's about 3 months, and we still haven't heard from the NIH Recover trial. The only FDA-approved phase 3 clinical trial in a regulatory pathway for an approval for long COVID, and could also be applied to vax-injured patients. And, because we've been treating thousands of vax-injured patients with a lot of success. The stories out there, the anecdotes are out there, but we need to put it through a clinical trial. So, we've been emailing, we've been trying to get in touch with Dr. Bhattacharya, trying to get in touch with Bobby Kennedy's team to be like, hey, listen, we got everything lined up here. We can start enrolling our first patients tomorrow. We just need a government funding, because our entire study, Jimmy, all self-funded. We self-funded the entire thing. We don't have any money to continue, and we're seeing billions of dollars going to all these nonprofit groups that are, this is the biggest grift out there. We're talking about Doge, and we're talking about USAID. I think we need to look at NIH funding. I think we need to look at the Recover trial and see where that money is going. I mean, their Stat News did a paper on this, a report, I think about a year and a half ago, and they said there's no accountability. There are no clinical trials. All these have gone to fill academic pockets, and you got people, both groups, and I consider both the long COVID and the vax injured, they're cousins. The pathology is the same, S1 proteins causing vascular inflammation. There are literally tens of millions of Americans right now that are crippled and debilitated, and we're doing absolutely nothing for them. disability. I'm filling disability forms out all the time for these people, and these, here's the other thing, Jimmy. There's also this notion that these are like lazy people, or there's some psych issue here. Jimmy, you're a well accomplished person, right? You're not going to be making, well, you have no reason to be making this up. We've got members of Congress right now who are suffering from this, who are telling us what can we do for the last 2 years, but the NIH, other government regulatory agencies just were not giving us a time of day to get our stuff out there. So, I'm hoping with the new administration, with Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Bhattacharya, we'll have a chance to actually do something to help these people.
Well, I think you have a better shot of it than ever with Jay Bhattacharya at NIH and RFK at HHS. I mean, I'll be surprised if you don't hear from them. I'm sure they're overwhelmed with things right now, but I'm sure they'll get to it. I'd be surprised if they didn't, put it that way. And I just want, also this Yale study, they quoted you, right? They quoted your study, correct?
2 of our studies, yeah, they cited us in the study.
So
yes.
All right. So I just wanted to show you. You tweeted out your journey on trying to get your study, which showed the same thing. Our post-COVID vaccine syndrome findings from 2020 along with the whole peer review process. It is validating to find the Yale group citing us and corroborating what we found in 2021 and 2022. I wish the world had known what we were finding and trying to get published. For full transparency, I'm posting even the negative comments from the journals. So you're trying to get published in medical journals and they wouldn't publish it because now we know after COVID, I know that personally, I know that the medical journals are all corrupt. They're all corrupted, and they're corrupted by NIH money. They're corrupted by big pharma money, which they take. I exposed the editor of the British Medical Journal on Twitter for being a corrupt piece of it on the take. It wasn't hard. I could do it. It wasn't hard. So I have also blacked out the names of journals of people we correspond with because this is not anyone specifically, but overall struggle when you are on the outside trying to get something that the medical community considers uncomfortable peer-reviewed. So by early May 21, we were observing people with post-COVID symptoms were getting the COVID vaccines and their symptoms were getting worse. Likewise, we started getting people who never had COVID present to us with persistent COVID vaccine complications. That was me. We had no idea the prevalence or how many people were experiencing this. Well, I can say this. I know that with the swine flu vaccine, the serious adverse events was 1 in 100,000 vaccine administrations. In 1999, with that vaccine, I forget the name of it, it was 1 in 10,000. They pulled the vaccine. They pulled the swine flu vaccine. 1 in 100. Right now, the COVID vaccine is 1 in 800 vaccinations produces a serious adverse event, and those vaccines are still being recommended for pregnant women and babies. 1 in 800. Okay, just so you know. You started collecting the results of blood work on vaccine-injured patients starting in May 2021. The cohort of patients were ones who got vaccinated between January 21 and August 2021 and had never had a known COVID infection. We also screened with negative nucleocapsid I don't know what any of that means. With all the mass spec and protein sequencing, the whole process took months to complete. In total, 50 vax patients and 45 controls vaccinated and no complications. First drafts of the paper were completed by March 2022. You sent the manuscript to the government agencies along with long COVID academic clinics to bring awareness. Plan was to engage with the government to get awareness. We understood that these findings were uncomfortable to many, and our sole focus was to bring attention to the people who were suffering. We could have made a broad public statements and gotten social media clicks, but we wanted to see if people in power would listen to us. When we had no response, we decided to post on a preprint server. Again, tried to engage with long COVID clinics and the government that vax complications were rising. They got no response. Your paper's not peer-reviewed. That is the universal response that we got. Okay, let's get it peer-reviewed and published then. The first journal you submitted it to on December 29th, 2022, rejected it with no peer review. January 3rd, 2023, comments, none. No peer review were even offered. Second journal submitted on January 3rd, 2023, rejected with no peer review. January 10th, comment, lower priority for the journal. No peer reviewed offered. The third journal submitted on January 30th of 23, rejected with no peer review. February 14th, comment, research results are too premature for public review. No peer review for publication. No peer review offered. Let's go to February 15th, accepted for peer review. March 1st, 2023. June 15th, 2023, the journal emails to say that we are having difficulty finding reviewers. And if we had any suggestions for reviewers, we are sitting in limbo. So what does that mean? That means that there were doctors didn't want to get their fingers dirty by validating what you found, so they wouldn't review it?
Pretty much. That's what you can assume. Usually, if you get accepted for peer review usually most journals within 2 weeks of being accepted for peer review, they will have people, I would say 2 to 4 weeks is reasonable. They will actually have peer reviewers lined up. And I want to mention something, Jimmy. These are all like well-respected journals. Because again, one of the things that people, there's a lot of what's called predatory journals. So you pay them like $4,000 and you send them a paper and tomorrow they're going to peer review it, right? And then the problem is that the rest of, try to get the acceptance from the medical and scientific community, they're going to say that's a predatory journal and they're just going to poo-poo it, right? And that's why even the peer review and the journal process is just so corrupt to try to get these into this into the top journals. I mentioned this before in your show, Jimmy. It's an oligarchy. You got to be in this circle. You got to be in this this club. You're either in it or you're out. And apparently we were out of that club. And so this is the only journal that said that they could find a peer review, and it took them about almost 4 or 5 months before they could even find anyone to accept the peer review.
That's kind of amazing, right? So here's the list: review rejected, reviewer 2 did not submit review, reviewer 3 minor revisions, quality assessment 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, we had 4 reviewers. One, I have full transparency here. One rejected the paper, but there are no comments why. Second reviewer said didn't want to submit any peer review. The third reviewer actually, and you can go on my X draft or my X page and see the comments. The whole thing I've been absolutely transparent about. 4 out of 5 stars, Jimmy, is actually anyone that's gone through the peer review process. That's actually pretty impressive. And we haven't had any of our other peer-reviewed papers at first pass get 4 out of 5 stars. And you can see the comments from 2 of the peer reviewers. They just only recommended minor revisions. And in this journal, if you get 2 very strong peer review comments, peer review assessments, you're going to get this journal. You're going to get published in this journal. So we were, my team and I were just high-fiving each other now in the summer of 2023, thinking, hey, maybe we finally got over the hump. But turns out that they rejected the paper too for no reason.
And so what do you think the real reason is?
It probably then, honestly, I'm speculating here, Jimmy, but we published in this journal before. We used the same materials and methods section. They came back and we've published the same exact paper. See, when we published our long COVID paper in 2020 and 2021, we used the same exact technique to figure out the vax injured patients. Like I said, they're both kind of like cousins of each other. And, we've gotten that paper probably cited over 500 times. And for the journal to then to come and say, oh, you guys are looking at the vaccine? Same technique, cited over 500 times. That paper's been viewed over 75,000 times. and then for them to reject it, you can only start speculating and saying it's because of the vaccine. It's a very, very controversial topic that no one wanted to put, and even to this day, they don't want to put their name on this. They're worried, and especially, a lot of these peer reviewers, they're in academics. A lot of them have pharma ties, and they're compromised. That's just I'm going to say what it is.
And so this just goes on and on. It just keeps happening on and on. Here's another one. You get a rejection note. Their comments were the many errors contained in the paper, design, experiments, interpretation, prevent further review of the paper. The paper is unsuitable for publication in this journal.
And Jimmy, that's the paper that we got 2 of the reviewers writing 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
And we published in there before. So this is from their specialty editor, who wasn't even part of the process. They brought this editor in because we were waiting for about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, and we were waiting for the confirmation it was going to get published. And then one day I wake up, I get an email, I'm sorry, but we just reviewed it again, and sorry, you're not pass and go.
So this is the corruption inside medicine. This is the corruption inside medical journals. So recognizing that the new U.S. administration might be more open to this topic and perhaps the landscape of having these uncomfortable discussions had changed, I resubmitted the paper into peer review on November 13th, 2024. But what happens next is dizzying. I can't find the proper word. On December 30th, the journal emails Bruce requesting him to review our vaccine paper. Obviously, it is an error, but turns out the journal was still having a difficult time finding people to accept peer review, to review it. On February 13th, the editor of the new journal emails to tell me they're still having difficulty finding reviewers. So that is how this process works. We did what we were told to do, submit for peer review, and we will consider what you are saying. But if we can't even get into peer review for a chance to be heard, then what's next? Despite lies and smear pieces, no one, including myself, has ever been paid or employed or even had a contact from Bruce or Inceldix. We did the research for free, love of science, and genuinely wanted to help people and make a difference in this world. Finally, we have an FDA-approved phase 3 clinical trial on 506(2)B regulatory pathway for approval if successful. While the target is for PASC long COVID, we believe this trial will also lead to a potential treatment approach for post-COVID vaccine syndrome. So that's where we are right now, correct?
Exactly, Jimmy. We are trying to get the attention of the NIH, the FDA, and the FDA knows about this. They approved our trial. We want to run, what we want to really do is get additional funding and run a parallel trial on post-COVID vaccine syndrome. So we actually would have FDA-approved medications to help the vaccine injured. Because right now, patients got to spend thousands and thousands of dollars because you go in and you say, I've got vaccine injury, and a doctor's going to say that's impossible. Even to this day,
that's what they said to me.
It's impossible, right? We actually had a doctor in our own group that left our group and got really mad at Bruce and I for studying the vaccines. Literally, this doctor told us, "Why are you doing this? We should not be putting this sort of data out there." And this is the mentality of a lot of physicians out there. We should not be looking at this. And it's outrageous. It's morally disgusting. It's unethical. You find science, you find things that are uncomfortable all the times, and we have a moral duty to share that, to figure out what to do. Instead, we've been hiding, and we continue to hide. And that's the thing that's infuriating about this whole ordeal. And then what's happened now, Jimmy, is that this has become a giant business. These nonprofits are like popping up everywhere, like the long COVID space. Everyone's got a nonprofit and doing advocacy. And I'm going, what? You got 20 million long COVID patients. You got several million vax-injured patients from some of the studies coming out. And what are you guys doing? You're making T-shirts. You're raising money for your nonprofits and your groups. We got to be running clinical trials, and all we're asking is for a little bit of money not sent to us, to the University of Arizona, so we can get these trials going. And it's just because we are on the outside and we're talking about very uncomfortable things. We've just have not heard from anyone, and we're just honestly, we're begging right now. I'm going to be honest with you, Jimmy. We are begging. We're trying to get help. Thankfully, we got members of Congress that have vaccine injured patients. They are family members that are suffering from post-COVID issues. Then, like you said, I'm hoping the new administration will all work together to come up with solutions here.
Well, it is amazing. I mean, COVID really opened my eyes to how corrupt the medical industry is from top to bottom, from your local doctor to your local pharmacy, to the head of the NIH, FDA, to medical journals, to, of course, the corporate media, which is bought and paid for. That's why they advertise. That's why Big Pharma advertises on your local news station. It's not to fund them to do investigations. It's to fund them so they don't do investigations and they don't say anything bad about Big Pharma, because if they do, they'll lose their funding. That's the whole point of it. That's how Tony Fauci was such a maniacal controller of things, because he controlled the purse strings, and that's how he got the proximal origin paper written, right? So the scientists went to Wuhan. They reported back to Tony Fauci and said, hey, it looks like it came from the lab. Tony Fauci gave them $8 million in funding, and they said, hey, no, it didn't. It didn't come from the lab. It came from this wet market. So that's how it works. That's the corruption that's happening, and it's top to bottom, and it's got me questioning everything. And guess what? You should question everything. And so, I mean, to the point where I'm questioning climate science, because if medical doctors can be, and medical journals can be that corrupted, why wouldn't? What does it cost to buy off a scientist now? Steak dinner? Anyway. Well, I really appreciate the work you did. You really saved me. I remember when I went into a neurologist for my occipital neuralgia, it was called, which is nerve damage. And I said, I got it from the vaccine. He goes, that's not from the vaccine. As he just said it, without even examining me. And I was like, this guy's an asswipe. And he asked me if I was, first of all, he said, are you vaccinated? I said, yeah. He said, okay, we can take off our masks. And I was like, this guy's an asshole. And he was. And it took me 2 months to see him. That's how screwed up things are in America. There's my volley back to you who don't want government running healthcare. It took me 2 months just to see a neurologist, just to get in to see him, and he sucked. Anyway, is there anything you'd like to say that I didn't cover?
No, Jimmy, I really, honestly, being kicked and abused and defamed and smeared and doxed, I do appreciate the advocacy and the work that you've done in this space. For obviously you can empathize with all those patients out there. So I do appreciate you giving a voice to the patients, and also the research here. And I'm hoping that, rather than all of us being called anti-vax or anti-science, that thankfully the Yale people confirmed all our findings, that we can all work collaboratively with the new administration in following the science and uncovering the truth here and helping people. That's the end of the day. It's about getting people better. And I don't want, what I'm concerned about is these, fighting between different groups. It's vaccine injured and long COVID and prevalence. And I think that's important. We got to talk about it. But I think we got tens of millions of people that are suffering. They're lost their jobs, their disability. They're just homeless, and we got to help these people. We got to get them better. So I appreciate everything you've done, Jimmy.
Right back at you. Thanks for sticking your chin out and getting it kicked in. That's a very thankless job, but maybe history will look shine. I'm sure history will look down on you in a positive way. Dr. Yogendra, did I say it right? Oh, I got it right. Fantastic.
Got it. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Everybody follow him on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
At Dr. Yostradamus.
There you go. Dr. Yostradamus.
Nice.
Okay. All right, doctor. It's great to see you again. I appreciate all your help.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, guys.
Come see us on tour. We're going to be in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.